Hi there. My name's Stephen England from the Art of Sustainability. We're a collaborative social enterprise delivering educational events, consultation, and facilitation in sustainability. You can find out more on the website, theartofsustainability.co.uk. Today, I'm in dialogue with Dr. Ron Johnston and Veljko Armano Linta, who I'll invite to introduce themselves in a moment, and their experience in relation to the theme, which I'm now going to introduce. The theme of the discussion is a practical approach to the Berlin Declaration ESD for 2030. And we'll be highlighting two of its components. How can we ensure that ESD is a foundational element of our education system at all levels, especially in relation to transformative learning? And how can we harness the potential of new digital and green technologies? So before we go into this any further, I'd just like to invite Veljko, who is known as Val to his friends. I put myself in that place, and to Ron just to introduce himself. So Val, if you could just introduce yourself, please, and then Ron.
Sure. Thank you, Stephen. Very happy to be here talking about these very, very precious topics and very important. Originally I was trained as an architect, and I'm actually still active as an architect, but I've also been an educator in the field of integrative sustainability and regeneration. I'm a Gaia Education certified trainer in 4 dimensions of sustainability, so ecological, social, economic, and worldview or cultural. And I've been designing and facilitating a range of workshops, courses, and lectures about sustainability and regeneration for local communities, for students, for teachers, for different professional associations and the general public and the civil associations or the NGO sector. And one of the biggest commitments I've had on this part of training has been leading the design of teaching scenarios for sustainable development as an interdisciplinary cross-curricular topic for Croatian high schools and primary schools, so the public system of schools in Croatia. And yeah, well, happy to tell more about that project and other experiences, and please go on, Ron.
Hi, thanks both. Thanks for inviting me to this dialogue. I've been a science educator until 2016 for about 17 years, University of South Wales, and in Wales, sustainable development was a required embedded component since about 2008. And so a lot of my activities at that time were embedding ESD into science curriculum at HE level, higher education level, and further education level. 2016 saw a bit of a change for me. I was asked by Unesco to join them as the science consultant for a project which was working on textbooks for sustainable development. And this led to putting it into practice in a couple of states in India, Sikkim being the major one, where we managed to see what the successes of this were and where the pitfalls might be so that they could be addressed further. My current activities are refining ways to embed ESD with an equal emphasis in curricula at all levels. And one of my desires is to extend this beyond formal education and moving it into a community-wide awareness, and where we probably all join in our aspirations for a more ecologically sensitive and aware society.
That's great. Thanks, guys. So yeah, so we've got a lot of experience here in practical ways of delivering education for sustainable development. And yeah, I just want to start picking your brains and yeah, dropping into some of the topics in the Berlin Declaration. There are quite a few commitments, but we're going to focus, as I said, on two of them. The first one, if we can start unpacking, is how can we ensure that ESD is a foundational element of our education system at all levels? And the actual declaration does refer to transformative learning, and I think one of the things we need to sort of understand or unpack or get a handle on is what when we have this conversation, what do we think we mean by transformative learning? Val, can I ask you to just lead on that, to start with that, please?
Sure. I actually think this is a crucial aspect of not only learning, but of sustainable development as such, or better yet, of regenerative development, because we are often presented with sustainability topics as problems that just we need to find a simple solution to, often technological, which is a rather mechanistic view. And one could even argue that this mechanistic view of things has gotten us into our predicament because of a lack of systemic, integrative thinking, which would be useful for tackling complex systems that we live in, whether it's societal or natural complex systems. So we're, for example, often presented with climate change as something that only needs a technological fix, whereas we forget to think about the underlying causes of climate change, such as the rules of our economic system, the rules of the monetary system, our cultural system, which has been too oriented to consumerism, at least in the global north, which has been driving from one side this exponential economic growth. From the other side, it is the reliance of the states and debt, which is driving the economic growth. So these are systemic things that are not often talked about. Another part of that paradigm is this idea that we are all, little more than brutal animals, us humans, in competition with each other. And that is the reality of human beings and of human societies, which is, again, reinforcing this paradigm of economic growth and of profit at all costs, etc., etc. So these things are not questioned enough. When we are in learning processes in schools, it is really insufficient to focus on knowledge and skills. These underlying assumptions that we make about who we are as a species, who we are as individuals, how we can make meaning come forward in our own lives as individuals, but also in the way that we live as communities. These are all things that I think should be a part of education for sustainability, education that will allow us to tackle the root causes of the current crises, but also to go towards what we might call an ecological civilization. Now, so this has been a long way to say that any education that really wants to contribute to building a new world needs to encourage and allow and empower learners, students and teachers alike, to question their identities and the meaning that they put on different things, from their own worth and from their own character to what the society is and should be. This allows all of us to transform. Okay, this allows us as individuals and societies to transform. So this is, in my opinion, the essence of transformative learning. This is something that allows us then to go into very, very deep changes that we need to make, obviously. So in my project that I mentioned earlier, with including the interdisciplinary topic of sustainable development into all subjects in the curriculum, one of the main points was not to lose track of everyday life situations that students and teachers can relate to, so that they can see all the knowledge that is there in the curriculum in the light of, okay, what does this actually do in the world? And then to look at it from the prism, is it doing good? Or does it have destructive consequences? However much expertise I have, am I able to apply it in a constructive way? Otherwise, it's a problem. My expertise might actually be a part of the problem. This, again, is a transformational part of learning, and looking at myself and assessing, okay, should I change the way I approach things?
Thank you, Val. Ron?
Yeah, I totally agree with Val that transformative initiatives in education are very, very important, and we need to look at it in two aspects of transformative, in the sense of the individual educators and learners, and transformative in the sense of the impact that will have on society, allowing it to transform into what I previously mentioned as a more ecologically sensitive society. I highly agree with and echo everything Val said, but there's a couple of things that I think are important in trying to approach this, what has always been a thorny question of what is education for, but then add to that, what is education for sustainable development for? I mean, and this has to be taken on board in a holistic sense, I feel. Much of the work I've been doing has been trying to bring this into a harmony between the instrumental desires of an educational system which is assessment orientated and for the production of qualifications, and trying to get ESD into a parity of importance with these other sometimes quite laudable objectives. And the reason I say they're sometimes laudable is the fact that we must realize that education is the source for the competencies that run our highly technocentric society, global society. We do need dentists, we do need medics, we do need a whole host of other professionals. And I think we need to be careful about not sidetracking those too much. Certainly don't want to sidetrack education for sustainable development. The personal, philosophical and social development that Val refers to, I think is absolutely vital. It requires to be embedded in a level of personal development for all learners at all levels. But when we look at this technocentric society, the problems we face, the socio-environmental problems we face are multivariate. And so it requires a multidisciplinary approach to this. And this is where I think holism is the name of the game. We need to bring in to play an interdisciplinary approach to education. I highly believe this. I mean, there are various ways this can be done, of course, through issue-centric learning and problem-based learning. But fundamentally, we need to have the philosophy and the willpower to implement this. Just to move away or develop that, just finally, the scary topic of technology and a technocentric approach to things. Yes, there has to be a fundamental shift in our understanding of our interactions with the environment, and we really do need to revise our social ecological contract for all this to come about. But when we look at technology, technology will be required on the scale of that we're trying to operate on. And my feeling is that up till now, throughout the Anthropocene, we've had technology approaching, trying to change nature, adapt nature to us. And I think probably part of ESD is actually not trying to adapt nature to us, but to try and adapt our powerful technologies to be in harmony with nature. And that way, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, which I think is an important aspect of ESD.
Thanks. I'd like it, if I can, just take a few moments just to drop down a little bit more in detail about the particular projects that you've been involved in, and how they've delivered to educators directly, and had real impact. So I know from your perspective, Val, if we could touch upon your cross-curricular approach, and we can come on to the digital aspect later on in the second question. But just give an idea what that project is trying to do in terms of delivering real benefits to educators at the chalk face, as it were. And Ron, and for some of the work that you've done, and I'm kind of thinking of Sikkim in particular, where I know you've delivered some of the work that you've been doing with UNESCO into that space. So can I just invite you just to give us a bit of information, a bit more detail around that, Val?
Yes, absolutely. So rather recently, a few years ago, sustainable development was officially introduced as an interdisciplinary topic in the Croatian curriculum. So, I mean, of course, it was present in bits and pieces in different subjects before that, but this was the first time it was really introduced. So not as a subject, okay, not as maths or Croatian or physics or visual arts, etc., but as an interdisciplinary topic. So the question obviously was, okay, if it's not a subject, how do we actually include it? And the expectation from teachers was that they would include it in teaching their subjects, so that when they teach the subjects, they not only have to, look at all the outcomes that are written in the curriculum for their subject, but they would also look at the outcomes written in the sustainable development curriculum, so that during the year they cover some of those. Or alternatively, that a school makes a subject that is not compulsory, that interested students can attend, and a focus for that subject might be sustainable development. So then the outcomes would be covered for at least a part of the students and those extra hours they would do on top of the regular class schedule. And well, with these expectations, teachers were actually in quite an uncomfortable position, and rightly so, because they were not trained in sustainable development. Neither was there a huge amount of workshops or lectures about sustainable development in their professional development opportunities. So they said, okay, but how do we do it? It was a legitimate question, and then what happened was quite a nice coincidence, and that is that there had been a project already running for several years where teaching scenarios had been created for various subjects. Teaching scenarios meaning that you take a topic such as, I don't know, decimal numbers in maths, and then you have 5 activities that are written out as instructions or proposals for teachers to use to tackle the topic of decimal numbers. All these were then published online. There is a huge database of such teaching scenarios, so that all teachers in Croatia would be able to access those and use them. And very importantly, all of these activities that form teaching scenarios got expert reviews, not only in terms of being, correct, but also in terms of being contemporary in the sense of pedagogical practices applied and being aligned with the official outcomes in the curriculum. So at this point, all the subjects more or less got these teaching scenarios, and here came the opportunity, or actually the requirement, to make teaching scenarios for sustainable development as well. And so we use that opportunity to create interdisciplinary teaching scenarios for sustainable development, so that all those 5 activities that cover a topic would be of a different subject. And for each activity, there is one crucial thing. That activity is a subject activity that at the same time tackles the outcomes required by the subject level curriculum and the outcomes required by the sustainable development curriculum. So for example, with just little kids in the 5th grade of the primary school in Croatia, you would, for example, have a scenario of what can fit into my green street. And you would have a math activity in there where children would devise a green street in terms of, okay, let's plant a tree, let's have a photovoltaic panel on above a bench, and all other sorts of things that they can represent with, like, make a little map and make a legend and represent all these elements with triangles and rectangles and circles, etc. So they would cover these math-related outcomes while applying it to a sustainable development topic, which is, making a nice green street together. At the same time, in the same scenario, you have, for example, an activity that is in the music curriculum, or actually in the subject of music, where students design a street festival in a way that they cover the stylistic preferences of different age groups who live in the neighborhood. So they are making, of course, a festival based on songs that they can sing then and analyze, etc. All the things that they would do in the music class anyway. But what they are doing is also tackling this social aspect or social dimension of sustainable development. So how does a local community work together to create something for the public good, which can then translate into for example, being more united when it comes to protecting a park from unneeded or unwanted development, the park that they created in the math class, etc. So these were just 2 very, very simple examples, but the idea was then that for teachers it's easy. They just do the activity in their class. They're perfectly at home with the subject level, and the teaching scenario, the way it's written, also gives them the background about the sustainable development level, but they don't have to be experts. And still they will transfer the knowledge, skills, and attitudes from the sustainable development curriculum to the students. And they will do it in an interdisciplinary way. So for a lot of these scenarios, there is ample opportunity for team teaching. So the teachers actually in their schools come together, take a scenario and go like, hey, should we do this together? Maybe do it as a project-based learning week. Let's do something at the same time. Maybe we could even combine classes. So there is this kind of meta level of showing the students what collaboration of an ecologically minded society will look like, as Ron said. So we need experts to move into multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary work. And we know that one of the primary ways of learning is through modeling. So not just the content, but also if you see your teachers collaborating on delivering these kinds of teaching scenarios and creating these learning opportunities, this is something that will stay with you in 5 or 10 years or 2 years, when you become someone who can implement and do projects in real life, so to speak. So that's it. If you will have any more questions, Stephen, about how the project works, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's hear Ron's experience in the approach that he followed.
Yeah, well, I think we're just experiencing some parallel evolution here, Val. Just trying to take it point by point as you've raised it there. We've experienced the same thing of subject-specific teachers saying, what's this to do with me? I teach maths, I teach biology. It's nothing to do with me. I'm not trained in this. And that is a very common cry, especially in a very instrumental curriculum, which is geared for assessment and qualifications. So that similar hurdle existed here. And what I started to do was to build into curriculum development. I built in learning outcomes, ESD learning outcomes that were paired, that were matched with in this case, science curricula. If one was studying, let's say, organic chemistry, then there would be an element there of working out, is there a way to make plastics that are more easily broken down or that don't need the fossil fuel input and such like. And responding to those learning outcomes gained credit, because in a pressured curriculum, of course, people only study what is going to gain them credit. Teachers only teach what is going to gain credit for themselves and for the pupils. So that was the initial approach that I was taking for I suppose for over 10 years, really, since 2008, because ESD was compulsorily embedded into all subjects at all levels. But in order to try and get the teaching machine, if you like, to respond to the requirement of ESD, then it needed to be some assessment, some assessed credit had to be built in. So moving that forward into the UNESCO work, we started working on a textbook for sustainable development, and it was multidisciplinary. My area was the sciences. And when that came about, after it had been published, we then moved to an area, to a state called Sikkim. It's a Himalayan state, a fascinating state. It's the first all-organic state in India in terms of its farming output and tea plantations and everything, highly conscious of sustainability. Although, strangely enough, not really referring to it as sustainability. And so when we got there, the object was to collaborate with the Sikkim Educational Research Unit in building textbooks for A-level level for them within the Indian curriculum and at HE level. And in discussing with the teachers that were drawn from all over Sikkim, because Sikkim is a fairly remote and widely scattered population, it was absolutely fascinating to eventually find out what people's understanding of sustainability was. It's a multi-faith society, and it's particularly in the Hindu and Buddhist tradition, there are many sustainability aspects and initiatives embedded into their regard for nature and for the world about them. So that in some ways it was easy to look at that. But in other ways, when things like sustainability and SDGs were mentioned, they said, well, what is sustainability and what is well-being? Because in a country where in places finding enough to eat and finding enough water, clean water, is still high up on the demands and not being met. Well-being is a very different thing in Indo-Pacific countries where and low-tech countries compared to what we would consider well-being. And so before we could take that any further forward, we had to address that. And it was really good to be able to work with them in terms of what we would call a constructivist manner. In other words, to interpret, well, for them to interpret sustainability in terms of their own experiences, rather than parachuting in and saying what sustainability is going to be and what ecology is. We work with them largely to develop the textbook, the textbook for Sikkim, rather than to explain, rather than to tell them what they should be doing. They were telling us what they should be doing, which was really the key thing. And just for example, in the Sikkim and Himalayas, landslide is a very big problem. And so trees, the very young soils, the Himalayas are still rising, but trees are really important for stabilizing this. And as roads are driven in, which swathes of trees are decimated. But if we look at the traditional aspects of this in schools, school children, both male and female, are paired to a tree at a certain age. It's like a bonding, as it were. And it's called, for a girl, it's Mithra, and for a boy, it's Mither. And this respect for trees is so embedded into an ecological awareness of the community and the environment that they live in. And so we thought that would be a good place to start, and working through on what sustainability meant to individuals living in that particular situation. And of course, that was coupled with some of the science at whatever level. Now, if I may just continue a little bit, when you jump up to an HE, higher education level with the university there, then we're trying to do the same thing, really. And if we look at, for instance, I would say that all I'm trying to come round to here is something called issue-based learning, issue-specific learning, which allows for a multidisciplinary input to it. So we identify an issue, and in previous conversations, but particularly it's easiest to do it for just now, is genetically modified organisms, for instance. These are hailed as being the panacea to all impoverished soils. Let's get the genetically modified organism in there, it'll flourish and all the rest of it. And particularly like in tea plantations and such like. And what we're looking at there is a monoculture. These are infertile, they're sterile, they're not going to procreate, they're not going to, the farmers have to buy new seed. That's one aspect to it. We don't know what they're doing in terms of knocking out the biodiversity of the pollinators and such like. So what we're looking at there is suddenly what started out as a science issue is blossoming into a social issue, and an economic issue, and of course the environmental aspect of it. And so we need different disciplines to approach that and put their input into that. And in that respect, I suppose I'm interested in sustainability science, which draws not just from the life sciences and the hard sciences, but also draws from the social sciences. I don't know a lot about economics, but I know what I can see not working. And it's very strange. I had a conversation with colleagues before, what is sustainability? And there's a lovely rejoinder to that. I don't know what sustainability is. I only know what it is when I see it. And I have to say that the whole experience was a two-way learning process for us from the UNESCO, learning what sustainability was from people that actually had in their hearts, without external manipulation, a really close relationship with the land. So I think I hope that outlines, without being too verbose about it all, what was going on there. But clearly, we pulled in all the techniques that we thought that would work in that context, and then handed it to those involved, because we can't dismiss the fact that both at a state level, particularly in India and in developing states, and an individual level, is that personal progress for children is still a priority, and we have to try and make that bound up with the environment rather than just for personal aggrandizement.
Fantastic. Sorry, yes, Val.
No, please.
No,
if
no,
you want to comment,
please respond.
I'd like to comment as well.
Please respond, yes.
Okay, so Ron, I've been amazed by your project for a while, and I am still now that you've talked about it, and I'm also amazed by what you called some parallel evolution going on, which is always a pleasure. I think we can even sometimes get depressed by how slow we feel things are moving in the world, but then, you know, just reminding ourselves that there are people whom we might not even know who are doing almost exactly the same somewhere else in the world, or at least towards the same goal somewhere else in the world. That's really a very empowering thing, and I have very, very big respect for what you've been doing. And I wanted to just comment a little bit on how we approached something that you called "What does this have to do with me?" and this constructivist manner about, you know, about dealing with the learning process and including the local stakeholders of educational processes in our project. So the crucial aspect of this was actually that in devising these activities for teaching scenarios, the teachers were actually those who did that. So this was an interesting experiment in a sense that I presented them with topics that were devised to bring the curricular outcome closer to real life. For example, there is a curricular outcome for sustainable development saying that the student is aware of his or her influence on nature. So this is very generic. This is how do you deal with that? And then I translated that into a topic, one of many topics that could have been devised around this outcome, and I gave it a name. It was "I cook lunch twice," but the topic was actually that you cook lunch and then you make compost, which is the lunch for the soil, which then produces your vegetables again, etc. So it's a circle, and it's something easy to understand and something that a lot of people are doing already, and etc. And then I asked them, okay, in this team of 5 people for this scenario, I asked them, okay, so now you are the experts on your subjects. How would you introduce this topic and link it with your subject related outcomes? And they had to scratch their head a little bit, but then all of them actually came up with really good ideas, and we would meet together to discuss these ideas to kind of make it a rounded whole. So they were actually amazingly creative, amazingly happy that for, as you said, for subjects where they didn't see much connection between the subject and sustainable development, they themselves discovered the connection. It was really, you could see the joy on their faces. So that was really nice.
Yeah.
And also this collaboration that happened between them. It was a bit of magic there, because I even had a teacher of psychology say, well, you know, I actually never thought that teamwork could put so much attention onto relationship between people in the teams to produce these educational outcome or educational materials. And I was like, yeah, just bring that to your schools. Copy this approach to your schools. And also some of the ideas that they had, they went far beyond my expectations in terms of, you know, what some things, when you create these teaching scenarios, you have a certain amount of time that you dedicate to that, and you can't expect from teachers to, they were paid for this work, but you can't expect from them to, you know, revolutionize their whole subject. But still, there was a teacher who, on the topic of alternative currencies, actually made an activity where he would or teachers who would apply this activity would devise an alternative currency for the school itself.
Wow,
so that
great.
different kinds of exchange would happen between students and teachers without using the fiat currency of the Croatian currency. So that was really, really impressive to see how, as you said, you come with this open mind, where you want to understand the situation, you want to include people, you want to have them become partners in this process, and then this unleashes really respectable amounts of creativity and energy and positive attitude.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like it picks up, it develops its own momentum, doesn't it? It's like if we could annotate enthusiasm in the way that you would annotate mass, the more of it you get, then the momentum increases, and that sounds really great. I mean, I love your idea of having this digital bank with people who are thinking like this, and presumably all the people that are engaged in activities and initiatives that you've just described can input their discoveries, their expertise into this as they go, and that's what everybody says that positive feedback's a bad thing, but that's a terrifically good thing. It sounds great. It sounds really wonderful. One thing I did notice. Sorry, Steve. One thing I did notice in Sikkim was that because we were in a multicultural society, it was even more exciting, because not just a multi-faith society, but the culture in Sikkim is such that it comes from all over the northeast of India. You have Nepalis, Bhutanese, Lepcha, and it's just strange how this drew them together in terms of, that in our culture, this is that, and all sorts of other things. But I won't go on at length about that, because once I'm on the hobby horse.
I don't want to cut your flow. I just just keeping an eye on the time and all the rest of it. And what's fantastic is the way we're organically flowing into the next question, which is how can we harness the potential of new digital and green technologies. So I'm just bringing that into the conversation. I think we've already covered quite a lot. We've begun moving into that in terms of the project that you've been working on, Val, and Ron, your experience in Sikkim. I mean, I think these are inspirational. I think in terms of how that transformational idea is delivered on the ground, you guys have got great wealth of experience, and I don't want to interrupt that or stop that flow. As I say, I'm just conscious of time, and that question of how do we harness potential of new technologies and green technologies, which Ron and Val you'd already kind of started moving into, which is really interesting. I think for me, the other valuable thing that came out of both of these projects, and I just want to emphasize that or underline that, is the process of dialogue. That this isn't telling people what sustainability is or how to do sustainability. This is a co-creative activity, and that kind of respectful interaction between parties to find out, to reveal the potential, the possibilities, not going in there saying this is how it should be done or I know how it's done, going in there with an open framework, but with an opportunity to say, okay, let's open up the potential and co-create, collaborate with that, which is another thing which I think was really, really vital. And I just wanted to underline that. And there was one other area again, coming back to time, is around assessment, which was touched upon. How do we assess transformative education, and especially with ESDGC, in terms of using credits at school level or making ESD a compulsory module within degrees. So it was, I just wanted to get those in, and just allow you guys just to pick those up and run with those as you see fit. So back to you, whoever wants to start with that.
I think Val's probably further down the line in terms of experience with the digitization of as a resource. One of the problems where I was the availability of the technology to be able to participate in that. The mobile phone is the means of digital cyber communication there. PCs aren't quite so much. But that doesn't mean to say that old CD technology is much more useful in that context when you're off grid and off-piste, if you like, in that respect. And I think probably I would leave that area of what I can see the potential for it, but we were particularly working in the area of having a textbook. I mean, this is where I perhaps show my age in terms of feeling that a textbook that you can make friends with is a very good, I find it a better support than technology which allows you just to flash through things, although both have terrific pluses. But one thing that I was curious about, and it was something I was reading in a paper recently, and I'd really like your thoughts on that, Val, is if I'm going too far off piste, Steve, just stop me. But I just wanted to throw into the mix of at what point in terms of education for sustainable development are we moving into engineering, social engineering, in terms of pushing this as this is the dogma used in a friendly sense, if you see what I mean, that we're going to push. Bob Jickling, Canadian environmental education, who I worked with briefly many years ago, has a lovely paper of why I don't want to teach my children education for sustainable development, and he dismantles this in a very constructive way, largely saying we must not fall into the trap of saying what sustainable development, how it should be practiced in a sort of didactic way, because it isn't a one-size-fits-all subject. I wonder if I'm going a little bit off subject here, Steve, or is that something?
Yeah, no, I mean, I come back to the question of digitization.
Of course, yeah. I apologize. It's just what you.
Yeah, I did throw quite a lot at you, so that's understandable. So I think I know you have some views on the technocentric aspect of using that within education, and I know, Val, that this was an important aspect of the project that you were working on.
Yeah.
To use digital education. So if we can just talk about how you use digital in your project and maybe some of the pros and cons around that, Val.
Yeah. So actually, it was a requirement. So this was the whole project was funded by. Well, it was probably funded by the European Union, but it was commissioned by an agency within the Ministry of Education in Croatia, which is also the agency that tackles all things digital in educational processes. So it was a part of this move to increase the digital competences of Croatian teachers and students, but also to increase or improve the level of digital equipment in Croatian schools. So yes, a part of it is that all these 50 scenarios with almost 250 activities for various subjects are published online in a database that you can search. But yet another thing is that within those activities, you had to use digital aspects of education, but not for the sake of having it there. It had to be purposeful in the pedagogical process, and this was really strictly reviewed, because oftentimes I think, especially in educational reforms, we just get the latest shiny new things out of the gearbox, out the toolbox, and we just shower the educational process with that, as if that would miraculously solve things. One of these fashions, I think, has been, you know, the laptops and then the tablets and then whatnot. So yes, the technology is great as long as you use it to a meaningful end. So one of the good things about this was to be aware of the different levels of competences. We had to really take care that some of our activities used the digital aspect in a way that was just as simple as going online and, you know, finding a website. Because for some learners, some teachers, that was the level of, that is the realistic level of their competences right now. And we had to also cater to those who have a lot more advanced competences, where students would almost, you know, program some kind of a little machine or a robot that would be performing something that and would be charged by photovoltaics, etc. So yes, we're living. I agree completely with what Ron said at the beginning. We're living in a society that is going to need the deployment of technologies to aid us with the multiple crises we're in. But yes, I think it's a good thing that we teach the students that you know, they have to do it meaningfully, because that's what we need them to do as experts later on. And it does then tackle what Ron mentioned about these more philosophical aspects as well. Always taking care to, you know, not tell students, okay, you must do it like this, but to get them to the point where their intrinsic motivation kicks in, and then they can really happily be critical about their own work and the work of others, and give positive and constructive feedback all around, so that they do something that they wanted to do to make the world a better place. Because if we just tell them, oh, you have to make the world a better place, the only thing that we're going to end up doing is, you know, just people using technology to put up a fight towards those imposed things.
Yeah, and then we get the dichotomies, plural probably, of what does better mean. It means something different for everybody, and you know, making the world a better place for one person means, I don't know, wall-to-wall tellies, and for another person it might mean open fields. So it is it's an aspect we can't ignore, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things which come to my mind, and in earlier conversations outside this this one, is in terms of one of the things you've talked about, Ron, is that very often the textbook is the curriculum in many parts of the world. It is you know, it is the technology which people use. Just assuming that you can put this stuff online and it's available isn't necessarily the case. For some people, returning to the book is how they teach. Where even within Western digitized societies, people will very often teach from the textbook. So really, that's approach that you guys took in terms of starting with the textbook, you know, that technology, in terms of how to do that, and then transferring that to other parts of the world. It's kind of saying, well, okay, let's not just assume everybody's got access to digital technologies. Let's start with good old-fashioned technology first, and then work that into modern technologies, so that everybody's got access to those transformative approaches of learning that you've talked about. I think the other question, as we come to the close of this discussion, is for me is, how does digitization lend itself to transformative approaches? So, for instance, you know, one of the things we've talked about is that human aspect of change, that we need that feeling, that connection with the natural world. Does digitization lend itself to that, or or not? What are your thoughts on that? And I'll just throw that open, so pick it up however you wish.
Well, may I? Yeah, I just have it's a bit of a thorny one, that, Steve, but I think really for me, looking at it from the global north and the Western world, which is absolutely bristling with digitized material, and also the areas that are somewhat more remote, and for instance in India and developing countries, is the fact that it allows people, I think, on two levels. One, to see and witness, certainly virtually often, how environmental conditions and living conditions and social conditions differ. It gives the old thing of the imagery of an Indian street is very different to the imagery of a Croatian street or any European street. It just has a different cultural buzz to it, but it also can highlight the differences in wealth and resources and such like. In that respect, I think it lends itself to having that kind of insight. And I would just add to that it can also be used very well for making links between student bodies, almost like the digital pen pal situation, where people of the same age range, the same, although I'm beginning to think that intergenerationality, if that's a fair enough word, is where I'd like to see things go. But at least within one age group, which younger generation can talk to younger generation and exchange ideas in a way which has never ever been possible, even 20 years ago. So I think those two aspects of digitization are highly useful. If we're going to go down educating each other through lived experiences, then that's a brilliant trump card to be able to use.
I couldn't agree more, Ron. And this is all about, the ability to expand your views beyond what people used to. Even 100 years ago, people used to live in most of the world without ever leaving their village, or just marrying into a village 5 kilometers away, and that was their world. And so now we have this ability to do what you said, also to meet good collaborators in different parts of the world, be not only students but also teachers who can do projects together. We see that in the European Union with all sorts of Erasmus Plus projects, etc. Yeah. Plus the access to information, like provided that we make this digital technology available equitably to people.
Absolutely.
We are really democratizing our societies, our world. We are no longer dependent on a single source of information, be it a tele or a teacher or a shaman or a priest or a politician somewhere.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, very true.
That's okay. So I think we've come to the end of the hour. We could talk more, and I really appreciate we just talk so much more. I want to talk so much more, but time is time. So this recording will be made available on our website and YouTube and through the mailing lists, where you can find this and other important contributions to ESDGC. We're looking to do more workshops, inviting a wider audience participation on this and other themes. So please do go to the website or choose to keep in touch to find out what we're doing. And I'd like to just say thanks to Ron and to Val again, and thanks to you for watching us, and farewell.
Thanks, Steve. Great to see you, Val. Thanks very much for the chat.
Thank you both. It was a pleasure.